Okay, let's try and get a xamarin iOS project going, and the app actually running in an emulator on a Mac. Let's see. I am on a Mac with Sierra. There's all the info there. So I went to documents for setup install Visual Studio for Mac. And I just followed those instructions. No problems occurred, and it was very smooth process. So um, have Visual Studio Code also installed. So I need to make sure I install Visual Studio or run Visual Studio, not Visual Studio Code, even though supposedly you can build Xamarin through VS Code somehow. Let's see. I'm going to make a file. Let's see. New project. Let's create a new project. A multi-platform app. So if I say a multi-platform, this is going to set up to where you use Xamarin Forms, which is that using the XML and XAML to define what the interface looks like. And I'm gonna say, I'm not gonna do a blank one. I'm just gonna use one that actually has code in it already. It gives you like a boilerplate startup project. It's like a to-do list or something. So let's see, my name, and then the app's name is do a fitness tracker because I do fitness stuff. Create, and hopefully it will work. Okay, so this is what came up. I think that my screen recording software slows things down, but took about a minute. So we see Visual Studio in a Mac looks significantly different than on a Windows machine, but you can kind of see the same stuff. There's a solution explorer. The solution is fitness tracker. Then there's like the main project fitness tracker, which is the entry point of doing the cross-platform thing. And then fitness tracker droid has all the Android stuff. And then iOS has all the iOS stuff in it. And then if you look here, the entry point to these apps is the app.xaml. That's where it's like main, if you're in C Sharp. So if you look at the code here, we can see that there is code. There's already code for something being there. And let's see. I don't really know what any of this stuff is yet, but if I look at the C Sharp code as opposed to the XAML code, yeah, this is really slow because of the screen recorder. We can see this is your initialization, so it's like main or like ASP.NET, it's like the global thing. So what's actually happening is this main page is the how you tell the runtime what you want to be the starting screen of your app. So it's got an if statement. If device is iOS, use this main page. Otherwise, use a navigation page. I don't know why it's doing that, but if we look at views and we look at main page, we can see the main page is the first screen where we want something to show up, and it is a tabbed page. So this thing actually doesn't have any XAML. So it is just like a container. Like it has no visual representation. It's just the thing that organizes all the other things that do have visual representation. So things like, so it's creating a page, which means one screen on your phone. There's an items page and an about page, and then we're using code to actually instantiate what those are. Items page is a navigation pane, a navigation page in iOS. Otherwise, it's an items page. And then children, we're adding these children to the, let's see, that is the, I guess it'd be like main page if main page was a top level div. And then these two are like child divs. You're adding them just one at a time. And then I don't know how it's determining how both are showing up, but if we look at items page, that's just a screen that's listing a bunch of stuff out. So if we look at that, it is a content page, and there is this thing called a binding context. We're signing that. That's just kind of like the model. So you're just saying, what is the thing? We hover over this. It looks like it's too slow. It's not actually showing any IntelliSense, but this would be like an instance of some object that's the thing that has all of the data in it that we want to work with. But regardless of that, let's see what happens when we actually run it. So let's see, looks like I can just push play up here. It's emulated, the settings are for iPhone 8 and iOS 11.2. I can just push play, and it's going to start up an emulator. Couldn't get this to work on Windows for some reason. I think I had a installation error. Probably need to reinstall the stuff, but hopefully on Mac, Macs always work way better, and things just work without having to finagle things. So it looks like the emulator is starting up. So when you first run an app in debug, it's having to start like a virtual machine. So it takes a while. And then from then on out, it won't take that long unless you stop the emulator and you have to start all over. But the first time takes a while because it takes a lot of processing power to start up a virtual machine, which is what an emulator is. It's running a different operating system in a different computer system on your computer or within the realm of the computer you're on. Okay, so that was about 3 minutes to start it up, but it is working now. Your app just starts up automatically. And that is actually because, so I think right here, if I right click on the project, it looks really different than Visual Studio on Windows. So you have to remember what these are. These are the individual projects. There's 3 of them. And the iOS one was set as the startup project. So when I pushed play, the options were for iOS. And it started up the emulator, which I guess is actually available through Xcode, the SDK that's for Apple and Macs, and Visual Studio just uses it, which works pretty well. There was no issues at all, unlike Windows. So if I use it, I'm like clicking on these individual items. It's moving to the details of the items. So this is kind of like, this is what the items page is. It is using items view model. So if let's see, can I right click, navigate to, yeah, so the way that the editor works, or the IDE, compared to on Windows is pretty different. I'm trying to do a go-to definition, but I don't know, doesn't seem to have that capability. So I'm like, where is items view model? Where is navigate, find references? No, maybe I would think that navigate to base symbols. No, I don't know what it is. I'll have to look that up. But if I go into fitness tracker, I could just find it in the models. Let's see, view models. So items view model. So view models are, let's see, that is the models that bring together different individual models and provide all the information that one single view would need. So it's an items page and it needs all this information. So it needs item, but it needs more stuff. So it needs something like title, items, and it may have needed a lot more, several other things, but this is what it has now. And let's see, where is it getting the information? So let's see, we have execute load items command. This is a asynchronous task that is loading the items from a data store. So if I go to services, there's probably a data store service in here. And I say mock data store. So let's see, where is this getting it from? What is data store? That would be like a static class, but I do not know where that is defined. Items view model. Where is data store? Navigate. Yeah, that's kind of weird. So even though the Mac version of like building and running emulators is way better, the IDE is not way better. So I can't even navigate to where this thing is defined. And even the highlighting is, or the syntax highlighting in IntelliSense is not very good. So I have no clue at this point where data store is coming from. It would be something within the fitness tracker namespace. Base view model. Oh, here it is. Base view model has a data store. It's using a dependency to say, get the representation of an iData store based on what the dependency in service or dependency injection defines for that. But then it's just saying, just use the mock data store, which is right here. And this is where all this information is coming from. Okay, I guess this really doesn't matter. This is a very specific design or architecture, software architecture, and that doesn't matter because all that really matters is the simulator actually worked. And let's see, so let's stop that and exit the simulator. Try and reserve some resources. This computer's old. I'm going to make the Droid one the startup project. And then, so let's see, Droid, debug, iPhone simulator. Okay, so it's changed to, now the emulators are choosing, let's see, Android stuff, Android virtual devices. It's kind of weird. I'm surprised you can do this. You can emulate Android on Mac. Let's see. What else we got here? So the emulator is going to try and start. It's probably going to take a couple minutes. What else can we look at? So we see this project has all the business logic in it. So it's the code that is just platform independent. So it doesn't matter whether it's iOS or Android. The code is always going to be the same because the only thing that's ever different is the code that affects the interface, the UI. And that specific code would be down here in the specific projects. Um, okay, so the Android emulator has started up. I guess that's just installed when you install Visual Studio. It is actually working. That's not part of Mac by default. So this is the same thing. Emulator, first time you run it, takes forever to start up. You can see the status messages coming down here telling you exactly what it's doing, the application output. You can see it's doing a ton of stuff. That's why it's taking forever. But the emulator did open. It's been about 5 minutes. And then after it loads up the emulator, basically making a virtual machine, then it loads your actual app and just kicks it off. And so it starts right away. Looks like there's some error maybe. That's weird. I guess it did have some trouble because we didn't do anything. We didn't change anything. It was just the normal code. So should have just worked. So what I did was I stopped the debugging. I just pushed the stop button, and the emulator is still going. It's not broken. I mean, sorry, it does not turn off. Your emulator doesn't stop when you stop debugging. All that stops is your running app. So now, if I start it again, it doesn't have to go through the process of starting the emulator. So it's just going to load up your app, and it should be a lot quicker, but there's some runtime error. Hopefully that hopefully that was just a glitch maybe. This is disappointing because I ran another Android app earlier and it worked. So I don't know what's going on. Let me try that again. That's unusual. So I just opened another project that I had made earlier, and I didn't do anything else. I didn't do anything different with that one, but I set the starting project to Android. Maybe I chose a different emulator or something. No, because it was using the same one that was already up. And now, so this one, because it's Android, it has this navigation tab, which the iOS did not have, because maybe that's not an iOS thing, perhaps. So yeah, okay. So not sure what happened, but I've gotten an app in Android and iOS to run on their emulators on a Mac in Visual Studio. I could not get the Android emulator working on Windows. I had to just run it through the actual device hooked up by USB and do USB debugging, which was fine. It worked. And obviously, you can't emulate iOS on a Windows machine. So, okay. The next thing is, how do you get an iOS app to the App Store?